Welcome to A Million Ways to Live. I'm Chris. I'm here as always with my co-host Cassie. We're going to dive into, explore, dissect a million different ways to live a good life. It should be fun. The show and life, they should both be fun.
Sounds like it.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you know what we're talking about today?
Nihilism.
The exciting and optimistic world of nihilism, jumping from the truly positive and fun disposition of Derek Sivers to what is often considered the dark world of nihilism. So, yes, nihilism. My first question for you is, because you didn't know anything about nihilism at all, you've heard the word before,
Sure.
but never just ventured into what is that thing.
Right.
And surely you came about the, dictionary definition of nihilism first, and then ventured into roughly a week worth of, spotty research on what nihilism is. So from the outset of, okay, here's the definition of nihilism to your conclusion after a week of research, was there a big change in your perspective, or did it really just reinforce your initial reaction to what nihilism is?
So there actually was a big change from the beginning to the end of my, like you said, spotty research. So first I did simple Google search, what is nihilism? And that's when you get the pessimistic kind of dictionary definition of meaninglessness of life and, the dark side, I guess, of people. Nietzsche, is that how you say his name? Nietzsche. Okay, Nietzsche, the philosopher, who basically said our world was headed towards nihilism, and we would have to kind of go through that to come out the other side, is kind of how I understood it.
So let's stop there.
Okay.
What is the definition that you found of nihilism? What's the one sentence?
Ooh, I don't have it memorized.
What's if you had to gun to your head, what's nihilism?
The belief in nothing, coming from nihila, coming from the Latin word meaning nothing. Like, that's pretty much, I think, what showed up at first. Does that sound correct?
Yes-ish.
Okay.
So what I found a lot of was people trying to draw the distinction, the difference between certain definitions, some of which are correct, some of which are less correct. For example, there's a difference in what I found in someone who says that nihilism is, there's a difference between no philosophy and a philosophy of nothing.
No. Oh. Okay.
Which they sound like the same thing to someone that maybe hasn't ventured into this. So no philosophy would truly mean that I have no opinion on
Anything.
On life.
Yeah.
Or on anything in life. Whereas saying that life has no meaning, life has no inherent meaning, is a philosophy. It is coming to some sort of opinion.
Right.
Which is that there is no inherent meaning to life.
Yep.
So that's different than saying, for example, if you didn't think that, or didn't know, or just aren't considering that life may have no meaning, that's different than concluding
that life has no meaning.
Life has no meaning.
Right.
So, philosophy of nothing versus the no philosophy.
Right.
So, that is one distinction that I saw considered more than once. The other one is drawing the distinction between pessimism and nihilism. Did you encounter that?
I did. I actually, so like I said, I read a little bit, Philosophy Today or some website like that. I read, and then I listened to a podcast yesterday, which I thought you would be excited that I chose this one. It was by The Minimalists. Have you listened to that podcast?
I listened to that particular episode of that podcast.
Oh, that's funny.
Research for this.
Well, that's what I listened to also. So, unbeknownst to us, we listened to the same exact thing. But in that, they discussed the distinction between pessimism and nihilism. And, I might get it wrong here, but basically, to be pessimistic means you have to believe in something, because otherwise you wouldn't have those negative feelings. Like, a pessimist is things just aren't going the way they want them to. It's kind of like a deeper form of depression, versus nihilism. You're beyond that. It's not that it's not going the way you want it to. It's that I have a really hard time putting nihilism into words. When I'm listening to it, I understand what they're saying, but then when I want to recap it, it's hard for me.
It's a hard concept. It's because, people dedicate their life to schools of philosophy like nihilism or existentialism, which nihilism kind of comes out of existential philosophy. So, yes, it is a difficult concept to apply. Even the people that philosophers today consider to be nihilists, or the people who really established the ideas of nihilism, which were the existential philosophers. So most of the people that we call the nihilists would not, and even some of them outright said that they are not nihilists.
Right.
The idea that kept coming up is the idea of overcoming nihilism.
Yeah.
By embracing it.
Yeah.
Which is in itself a very confusing idea.
It is. So the theme, like from the podcast, the death of God, I felt like that came up over and over again, as that being like the moment that people have to, it's almost like a thing you have to go through to get to a deeper meaning in life. So you have to basically have this idea of no meaning, meaninglessness, and then that helps you see a clearer, truer meaning. That's kind of the feeling I got from listening and reading.
I think that's right, but I'll back up to that quote.
Okay.
So the death of God comes from Friedrich Nietzsche. It was in, I think, a couple of his different books. I have it in here somewhere. And I, in fact, so since we're in the world, or in the age of AI, one of the things that I think AI, at least the Chat GPT version of AI, is really good for is simplifying complex ideas.
Okay.
So I actually took that quote, the death of God quote from Nietzsche, and asked ChatGPT to explain that and how it relates to nihilism in a accessible way.
Maybe this will help me.
So I'll get that out here. I asked ChatGPT to do 2 different Nietzsche quotes and explain them. So here's the full God is Dead quote, which came from Nietzsche's book, The Gay Science, and I think it was also in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So the full quote is, God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all the world has yet owned and bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? So it's a pretty grim sounding quote. But it doesn't... Here, I'll just read out what ChatGPT actually came with.
Okay.
The death of God, Nietzsche wasn't making a theological statement about the literal death of a deity. Instead, he was commenting on the decline of traditional religious beliefs and values in Western society. The Enlightenment, scientific advancements, and the rise of secularism has eroded the unquestioned authority of religious institutions and beliefs. So the cultural implications: with the death of God, the moral and ethical framework that had been grounded in religious beliefs was also in jeopardy. If God, as the ultimate source of meaning and value, was no longer a guiding force, then on what basis could society construct its values? And this is where nihilism comes in. Nihilism is the belief that life lacks inherent meaning, purpose, or value. With the decline of religious authority, Nietzsche feared that nihilism would become a dominant force in Western culture. If there's no higher power or purpose, then everything might be seen as meaningless. I think the might be seen is really important. The challenge: Nietzsche saw the death of God as both a danger and an opportunity. The danger was that without a guiding moral framework, society might fall into a kind of moral and existential chaos. However, the opportunity was for humanity to reevaluate and reconstruct its values, to create new meanings and purposes. Overcoming nihilism: Nietzsche believed that to overcome the threat of nihilism, individuals would need to embrace the challenge of creating their own values and meanings. This would require a kind of self-overcoming, a transformation of one's perspective on life. Does that clear it up?
Still pretty deep. I mean, if I read over that 5 times and had someone read it to me 5 times, I might be able to talk about it a little easier. But it's just a big concept that is hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, I don't know. You and I grew up in Christian households. So the death of God may have come to us individually, and I don't know if you want to go into your current religious beliefs right now. Feel free, but I don't subscribe to the Christian religion that I was raised on.
Sure.
So I guess you could say I had a death of God in my own life and had to establish my own meaning, because I was raised with the teaching that I was living for God. And, we are, praying to God, and everything we do is for God.
Yep. So now what?
Exactly.
Do you feel like you experienced a death of God moment in your life, or was it just a gradual over time? You were like, I don't know about all this.
No, I don't think I had a moment. I think I had a bunch of moments. I mean, religion was that's a deep topic in my life. That's could be a whole, not just a podcast episode, but a podcast series in itself.
Sure.
So I had to do the surface level version of that different. Well, I was raised Catholic, and then somewhere around my 12 or 13-year-old, adolescence, that was when my parents went from a Catholic church to a Baptist church, and I was entering high school, and already we were the occasional churchgoers to begin with, and then going into high school, as you know, they became super religious and really fell in love with this preacher at this Baptist church that my brother's preschool class just happened to go have a little play or a presentation, or they sang a song or something there. And at that event, they fell in love with this preacher and started going to this church and became super religious, and then pushed that on me, who was entering high school and just wanted to hang out with friends. And, bad timing to force religion onto a, teenager.
He's already going to a Catholic school, by the way.
who is at a Catholic school.
Yeah.
So many death of God moments that came about as I got older. But getting back to this and the death of God idea, I think it leads to really some other notes I have here, which are on where I have the most notes, actually.
Okay.
The positive side of nihilism. Because if you take God out of it and just approach the idea of no meaning in life, mm-hmm. whether it's God or any other meaning that is inherent, it's somewhat oppressive, because if this is the meaning to your life,
it can be taken away.
Well, not just that, but you're beholden to that meaning. You didn't choose that meaning. You were born, and now you live for God, or now you live for whatever meaning it is. So the theme that I saw over and over was that this is a good thing mm-hmm. to go towards nihilism, because when you remove that inherent meaning, it gives you the freedom to ascribe your own meaning to life.
Yeah, I got the sense of that too. Like, I keep saying, it just seems like something you have to go through. Like, sometimes there was not just the death of God, but it could be any major life event. So the death of a spouse, the loss of a job, loss of a home, something that rocks your world. And then you go kind of into the deep dark, what is the meaning of this, of life? You know, I've lost everything that brings me meaning. And then you have to either come out of that or not, you know, like decide what does give you meaning. And so I think that's a positive also, because if you don't have something that, like I was saying, it can be taken away. So you can't just put all of your meaning into religion or another person, because something could come along and shatter those beliefs or take that person away. So if you don't have what you're living for you, then it's a dangerous way to live.
But I don't think we're talking about the same thing, because if, let's say, you put all of your meaning into your marriage, or mm-hmm. you put all your meaning into your work, you're free to do that. That's kind of the point here, because if there is no inherent meaning, you can put your meaning into it. May be dangerous.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't do it. And it doesn't mean it's not right, because if there is no inherent meaning to life, mm-hmm. then you're free to choose, be it dangerous or not. I mean, what choice wouldn't be dangerous? If you put your meaning in life to anything, that can be taken away from you. The only thing that I think you have it a little bit backwards.
Do I?
Because if there was inherent meaning to life, that can't be taken away from you. If it's inherent.
Okay.
If you're free to choose, or free to create your own meaning, whether that's a conscious choice or by just developing or going towards something without consciously saying, okay, my meaning is art, or my meaning is my kids, or my meaning is whatever. Mm-hmm. Anything that you go towards in life can be taken away.
Sure.
Except for the way you think. Like, you can change your beliefs. Mm-hmm. You can still live for family, or live for your kids, or live for whatever. It can't be taken away from the way you think, but it can be taken away in the physical world.
Yeah.
Following me on that?
I am.
Because I'm not totally following myself.
No, I've got you. That makes sense. Like I said, it was just a hard concept for me to fully grasp.
Well, that's why I think it's misunderstood, and that's why a lot of people don't dive deeper into it, because it just sounds dark. Life is meaningless. Great. That sounds like something I really want to dive into.
Right.
Or it's already synonymous in people's minds with pessimism, which mm-hmm. people look at as
negative, which it is.
Bad.
Yeah.
I mean, so the other part of that pessimism piece, I don't know if I came up with this or if because I listened to 10 different things and read a couple things, but it might have been in that minimalist podcast, but the idea of a cup half empty or half full, that whole example of various things. Whereas pessimism obviously is a cup is half empty. Optimism is the cup is half full. The nihilistic take would be that it doesn't matter if the cup is empty or full.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps. It's just another way of looking at that. Another way of
comparing nihilism to pessimism anyway.
Yeah. I have another Nietzsche quote.
Okay.
That seems to be everywhere when you look up nihilism, which was, did you find the, which I've heard this one before too, the staring into the abyss quote?
No, I don't think so.
This one I've heard before, but never really understood it. It just sounds like it should be in a horror movie. It says, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." So that's from Nietzsche's work, Beyond Good and Evil.
Okay.
Which, like the other one, it doesn't explicitly mention nihilism, but it's often interpreted in the context of Nietzsche's discussions on nihilism. So here's, again, I asked ChatGPT to break that down for us.
Okay.
Which I'm sure if a philosopher of any kind of scholastic reputation
probably hates this.
He's going like this, cringing at the idea here. But nonetheless, the problem with like college level professors of philosophy is they get so deep into the weeds on all of these already dense topics that the casual interested person can't access the ideas, because you say, well, what is nihilism? And then the philosopher goes, well, what do you mean by is? Well, let's just take the generally accepted definitions. And that's the problem that a lot of people have with philosophy, and that's why people always veer towards people like the Stoics, because the Stoic philosophy tends to be more practical and straightforward.
Okay.
Where modern philosophy a lot of times gets just caught up in the etymology of each individual word before you get to the point of, hold on, that's not the question I asked. And I understand you want to make sure we are both on the same page with every section of the question and every word in the question. But let's just make some assumptions and move forward rather than just getting lost before we even approach the topic.
Right.
So that's why I think ChatGPT is helpful in this situation.
Okay. Let's see what
All right. So nihilism in Nietzsche's view refers to the belief that life lacks inherent meaning, purpose, or value. When one confronts the vastness and indifference of the universe, the abyss, it can lead to a realization of the potential meaninglessness of existence. The act of gazing into the abyss can be seen as a metaphor for confronting these nihilistic thoughts. So, back to the idea we were talking about before of a lot of these philosophers who promoted the idea of embracing nihilism, but also having to overcome it. I think that's where that idea kind of comes in right here. Okay. So the idea that the abyss will gaze back into you suggests that once one contemplates nihilism deeply, it could become a consuming and transformative force in one's life. So, while the quote does not directly address nihilism, it is often interpreted in the context of Nietzsche's exploration of the subject and the challenges and dangers of confronting the void of meaninglessness. I don't know if I agree with that last line, the challenges and dangers. Well, I guess it does, because one other analysis of that famous quote of his is that sentence 1 kind of implies a way of looking at sentence 2. So sentence 1 is, he who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And the analysis I read was that that sentence tells you how to look at the next sentence, which is a little bit more abstract. Whereas that first sentence is pretty direct. Yeah. If you mess around with monsters, you might become a monster.
Yeah, be careful who you hang out with, because you end up like them.
Second sentence is abstract. What's the abyss? If you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Well, if you take the lesson or the way we read sentence 1 and say, okay, well, if you stare into the abyss, you can become the abyss, or the abyss becomes a part of you. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it's saying here. I guess because of sentence 1, becoming a monster is implied as a bad thing. I think it's generally accepted that monsters are bad. So that's where the challenge and danger of confronting the void of meaninglessness comes in. So back to the same idea. It opens us up to a couple of things. So the danger, I think, is people who take that interpretation of, or come up with their own interpretation of, what do you do when life has no meaning? I think it's the same argument that people who believe in God have against atheists. Whereas they'll say, well, if you don't believe in God, or in this case, if life has no meaning, then what keeps you from becoming a terrible person and murdering and stealing and inflicting suffering on other people? If you don't have God as meaning, or if you don't have meaning, then where does
your moral compass come from?
Yes. What do you think about that?
Oh. I think, well, I clearly think that it's possible to be a person with good morals, a contributing member of society without believing in God. I don't know exactly. I hate this subject. It's so hard. So I don't know, where does it come from if it doesn't come from God? That's kind of the question, right? How do you live life without murdering, stealing? I don't know, because you don't want to, because there's no inherent evil in you either. Just because there's not this inherent God belief, it doesn't mean that you hate mankind and want people to suffer. You just go through life like treating others how you want to be treated. I don't know. Can you just have that golden rule instead of only doing things because there's a God watching and judging ultimately how you live? Like, I'm just doing it because I don't want to hurt other people.
Well, you hit on one of the things that I've read about, is that to assume that people will move toward destruction or move toward evil as a conclusion of meaninglessness is effectively it's a bit of a erroneous conclusion, because that's making a choice that, in the same way it's not a glass half full, it's not a glass half empty in either. So why is destruction the choice from meaninglessness? Why it could go either way. You could choose to live a life based on what we consider good morals, or you could choose it could go either way.
Sure.
Now, what keeps it from, I guess, going more bad than good, I think, is the fact that what is inherent in people, whether it's an instinct or empathy. So people have empathy, and I don't think that is a learned behavior. I think it's been shown that just normal functioning, take psychopaths,
serial killers,
like people who have been like tested and like, oh, this person just does not have empathy.
Right.
Those rare exceptions, people naturally have empathy. So maybe, whether from evolution or if there was this creator at some point, maybe there can be a creator without God being the meaning. I don't know. But empathy exists in humans.
Yes.
So that might exist because life has no meaning. Maybe that is the safeguard. Maybe with no meaning and no empathy, then maybe we would all be completely self-interested and
destroy
murder anybody that comes in our way and steal and inflict suffering for the sake of inflicting suffering, because everybody would be a psychopath. But empathy exists. So empathy doesn't exist only if God exists.
Right.
Empathy doesn't exist only if meaning exists. Empathy just exists. So maybe that is the safeguard from divulging into chaos, like Nietzsche put it. I'm trying to now...
Did you read that somewhere, or did you just come up with this?
I think I came up with that, but I read a lot of things and I listened to a lot of things. Yeah. So, dare I say, I just tried to philosophize over Nietzsche. But
that makes sense, though, what you said. Like I said, I was having a hard time grasping a lot of the concepts. That kind of the empathy thing makes a lot of sense to me.
It almost seems like it's like going back to people that believe in God who are arguing against atheists. It seems like the obvious... I would consider myself agnostic, which I think is considered the cop-out answer in a lot of ways because...
You just don't know.
I don't.
Right.
Do you?
No. Who does?
So I think it's just stupid when anybody takes any stance on it, because...
How do you know?
Do you know?
Yeah.
You may have faith, but do you know?
No.
And the same to atheists.
How do you know?
Do you know?
Yeah.
Is as religious of a take as Catholicism.
Yeah.
But that just seems like the obvious answer, or the obvious question that I would pose back to someone arguing against an atheist. I'll help the atheist out. Hey, just ask them if they have empathy, and then ask them if they found out tomorrow that there was no God, would their empathy disappear?
I hope not. Right.
I guess that's a question that they might say, well, I don't know, but argue that it would not disappear.
Sure.
So it seems like a pretty easy answer to that argument, or easy response.
Yeah.
What else did you find? Anything interesting?
I don't have any really interesting tidbits. I mean, my main source of information was that podcast, and the podcast helped me understand a lot more than just reading it did. But ultimately, my conclusion from it all, I guess, is like you asked at the beginning, did my opinion of or interpretation of nihilism change throughout? And it very much did, because by the time I got through the podcast and listening to, I think his name was Peter, the guy that was being interviewed.
I don't recall.
Yeah, Peter Rollins. It didn't seem like such a negative thing anymore. It just seemed like a part of life that maybe everyone or will maybe experience at some point, with, just questioning the meaning of life. I think everyone questions, but if you go to the deeper, life has no meaning. I don't think I've ever experienced that at all. Nihilism.
Do you think that is a correct way?
No, I'm not saying that I won't. I mean, I've still got hopefully a lot of life to live, and maybe I will have a nihilistic stage of life where I hope not. I feel like it is something.
Well, why
that
do you
just
hope
comes,
not? If it's,
I don't know, because
if the conclusion is a positive outcome.
Because I don't want to have to go through the hard event that kind of spurs the nihilistic views.
I don't think it has to be a hard event.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary for a major life catastrophe to open oneself up to this idea.
Okay.
As dark as Friedrich Nietzsche might put it, you don't have to wait for, your family to be in a car accident to stare into the abyss. You can stare into the abyss tomorrow morning in the shower if you want to.
Yeah.
Just consider the idea is staring into the abyss. Unfortunately, Nietzsche's dramatic approach to writing makes it seem like you need to wait for this horrible moment in your life, because that sounds like what he means when he says staring into the abyss. But I don't think that's what staring into the abyss is. I think staring into the abyss is just considering that life may have no meaning. And he's saying that when you consider that, prepare yourself for accepting that idea, because you might look for it and find there's nothing there. Because I think that's what he thinks. I think. And that's you talked about how the Minimalists podcast is easier to help you grasp the idea more than just reading about it. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to do this podcast, is because two people who are approaching an idea as complex or as abstract as nihilism from a beginner's point of view, and coming at it and saying, I don't know what this means. Here's what I think it means.
Yeah.
Did you come to the same conclusion, or did you come to a different conclusion? And then having breakthroughs in that conversation and saying, oh, I didn't think of it that way.
Right.
That makes sense. And then just that back and forth. That's why this is a helpful setting.
Sure.
Hopefully to people listening, but definitely to the two people having the conversation. But obviously in the case of the Minimalists episode, in that interview, it was clearer and helped break down the topic to hear two people breaking down the topic.
Yeah. The conversational aspect of it instead of just reading the definition style. Yeah.
Okay.
So do you have any final thoughts, conclusions? Have you gone through a nihilistic moment in life?
I don't know. I don't know if I went through a nihilistic moment in life where I considered the idea that there is no meaning to life. I've certainly gone into times where I've raised the question, in the back of my head, is like, what's this all about? Or why am I doing this? Why am I going to work every day? What's the point of this? And, and then taking that and just running with it and analyzing life and saying, okay, why am I going to work? Why does this matter? Why am I trying to make money? Why am I waking up early? Am I doing all of this for no reason? What is life about? What should I be doing every day? Sure, I've asked those existential questions. Nihilism comes from the school of philosophy, existentialism. But until really, because I knew what nihilism was, but I'd never ventured into it as deeply as we have this past week. So no, I don't think I haven't had a nihilistic moment, or I haven't stared into the abyss until this week. I mean, I kind of say I stared into the abyss a little bit, and yes, in doing this, thought about that, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, as they put it, overcome nihilism, you have to create your own meaning.
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable conclusion?
Fair conclusion. Yes, absolutely.
One of the podcasts, it was a YouTube, like one of those very surface level explanation videos where they have, a lot of, I don't know, motivational scenes and sunsets and things going on in the background while a narrator says things in a dramatic, hushed tone of voice, like, have you ever considered nihilism and what it might, that kind of a video. But I found it to be a helpful starting point. Let's hit the top bullet points of nihilism, and then I went deeper into some books and some podcasts and some conversations and some essays and things like that. But I liked the ending to that video, and I would love to credit the person, but I watched so many that I don't have any idea who it might have been. But might be a good place to end today. The last line of the video was, "Nothing matters. Isn't that a relief?" Kind of, yeah. I think it's okay if nothing matters. Like, great. I do. I don't know. I know we're wrapping up, but it's like, well, if I just live my 80 to 90 years and am happy with it. I'm going for 150 years. Okay, well, enjoy those last 60 without me. No. All right, well, I guess we'll end it there. Maybe that's another episode. Perhaps. How to live life to 150. It's a health podcast. Okay. All right. Thanks. Bye. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. And please tune in next week for another edition of A Million Ways to Live. Bye-bye.